Real Estate Rockstars. This is Aaron Amuchastegui. Hey, you're about to listen to the interview that I did with Nick Krautter. So Nick recently re-released his book called The Golden Handoff. It's funny, before I took over the podcast in 2019, before Shelby took over for a while in 2023, long before both of us was a guy named Pat Hyben. Well, Pat had actually interviewed Nick twice on the podcast, maybe about 10 years ago about these. If you have any interest in commercial and industrial real estate, that's something that Nick talks about at the beginning of it. In the second half, he talks about his book, The Golden Handoff, and how big of an opportunity it is right now when there's agents out there that are deciding to quit the business, to leave real estate because it's more challenging, or to slow down and focus on the easy stuff, or people that have big databases but don't really want to go back and go after those databases or go after those leads, or they've done deals but they don't want to put them in a CRM. There could be a big opportunity for growing your own business by partnering with them. I think it's a really interesting strategy. I think you guys should listen up, and I hope you really enjoy it. So without further ado, here goes. All right, let's get started. Nick Krautter. Nick, where are you? Where do you live, man?
So I'm in Seattle. So I live a lot of places. Originally, I was in Portland, Oregon for 20 years, and also spent a lot of time in Southern California. And this summer, we've been traveling all over the world. So I was in Scotland for 2 months and Iceland, and just got to Seattle this week.
Cool. The Iceland is a fun place to travel. I guess all sorts of. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. Also, I grew up in Oregon. So I know a little bit about, right now you're in your great season up there when you're back home. It's nice to live in
this is A+. Summertime here is unbeatable.
Yeah. So you've been on the podcast before. You were on the podcast. I mean, I took over in 2019. Pat interviewed you before that. How long ago? When was the last time you were interviewed on the podcast?
It was probably a little before you took over. So I was on the podcast back in probably 2015 or 16 when my book, The Golden Handoff, first came out. And Pat was a big fan, and we talked about how I use that to grow my business. And then we did kind of a recap years later on that kind of same topic, kind of updating how that had grown. And now there's a new edition. So I'm really excited to be back and kind of share all the new exciting changes that have been made to that and help all the agents that are listening today.
Yeah. Yeah, lots changed in the last 10 years in real estate. Lots changed in the last 10 months in real estate. What's your business look like right now? What's your real estate business look like right now?
So I actually used the real estate or the Golden Handoff to sell my residential part of my business 2 years ago. So 800 clients. I sold that to a team. There's 4 agents on that team that are responsible for 200 clients each. And so that was interesting being on the other side. Just like in real estate, when you sell your own home, it's a very different experience than when you're helping clients. And so that was good for me to go through that process. Now I focus on commercial and investment. So we do a lot of investment sales and apartments. And I got my CCIM designation years ago. And so that's been my personal focus. So I have a small team of brokers that we work with clients helping buy and sell investment properties now.
Cool. So you started in residential, and now, you've grown your business, you sold your business. Now you're focusing on buying and selling commercial. What's happening in that market right now? What's happening in the commercial market?
Man, yeah. So commercial is interesting because it's very different city by city, more so than residential, and category by category. So Portland has, if you want to talk about the worst part of the Portland market is office right now. Yeah. We have the highest vacancy of any major city. We have seen some major properties sell for pennies on the dollar because the vacancy is so high. But then if you flip and look at industrial's done incredibly well in Portland. There's a lot of new distribution facilities that are being built. Amazon opened some massive distribution facilities in Portland. So in every city is like this, it's interesting because commercial is not one category. You have to look at different pieces of the market. So there's land, retail, industrial, office, and then multifamily. So those are kind of the main commercial fruit groups. Whereas residential is, house or condo. And so it's a lot more straightforward.
Yeah. Some of our agents might be thinking about transitioning into commercial, industrial, multifamily. How did you make the transition from residential agent to getting into commercial? Because like you said, there is so much to learn. It is so much different. What was that like? How long did it take?
Well, I would say 6 months to a year to really wrap your head around it. I would recommend everyone do the CCIM intro to finance and basically the CI 101, which is basically the time value of money, which is the foundation of all investment real estate. And that's the biggest, I think that's the biggest difference, is understanding the income and expenses and cash flows and management of larger properties where you have multiple tenants, and looking at it as a small business as opposed to just everything in residential is pretty much owner user, right? You live in it, and maybe you buy some rental plexes and things like that. I think if you've got some experience with small plexes, you can leverage up into larger multifamily. The financing's different, but the other food groups, I think you have to really just dive in and be a student. I would encourage everyone, if you're really passionate about it, you absolutely can do it. I know a lot of commercial brokers will tell residential agents like, "Oh, you can't figure it out; it's too complicated." Well, it's more complicated, but it's not impossible. It takes time. If you want to be a industrial specialist, there's tons and tons of little nuances about clear height and the types of doors and distribution access and rail and ports and truck lines and trains that could affect industrial in ways you really have a hard time understanding unless you really dig in and become a student of it. So I would say, like, start with the stuff I knew multifamily, so we started basically doing land and multifamily, and then grew the business from there. And I would ask for help, ask for advice. You have brokers you work with, have mentors that have more experience that can help you with that.
How did you find clients when you switched over into this new, like you started with multifamily and that? How did you? It's like starting a brand new business, really. So how did you find clients when you did it?
I got my foot in the door in Portland by listing commercially zoned houses. So a lot of districts in Portland, they had done rezoning, and the properties were still the original homes, from 1900. And it just happened to be zoned commercial. And so those slowly started getting converted into retail and offices and like bookshops and things like that. And I started to learn why those had more value than just the house across the street without that zoning. And so that gave me a leg up on getting listings. And then from there, I started meeting people who were investors and developers and started to learn from them what they look for when they're looking to build an apartment building, what kind of zoning they need, how they price it differently. So it's not price per square foot, it's price per unit, and how many units can you build based on that zoning. And so that's how I got my foot in the door, was by selling commercially zoned houses. And then that led to introductions with investors and developers. And then I would learn from them, and then I would go try to find what they needed.
Okay. So what do you like about commercial compared to when you're a residential agent? Like what's better in commercial?
If you're a total real estate nerd and you want to really dig in and learn real estate at a much deeper level, I think that it's really rewarding. You get to work on bigger projects. So the most expensive house I ever sold was $3.4 million, but we've worked on multiple investment properties that were over $10 million. And so, you work with less people, you do less transactions, but the fees per those transactions is higher. Like our average home price sale was probably 600, but our average investment or commercial sale was closer to 2 million.
Yeah.
And so the positives is, you have less clients, you do less deals, you get more involved. But the downside is also the same thing, right? In residential, you could have a lot more clients. The process is much more, kind of paint by numbers. The process is very similar on each home sale. And so that's where things can get tricky. And the sale fail rate in commercial is much higher because people are less emotionally attached. It's much more about, does it make sense or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How does commission work?
Commission is very similar to residential. And I would say, not having worked in like a city which has super high end properties like LA or New York, typically the higher the price point, the lower the commission. But you could still have 6-figure commissions on deals if they're big enough.
So my understanding of a lot of the way the commercial works out here in Texas and the way it worked in California was, yes, the percentages would be smaller. So whereas it's not uncommon for a house for both sides of a commission to be 5 or 6%, on a commercial it's different. It's also really common to see listings down here for commercial that don't offer a buyer agent commission, and or say like, buyer to pay their own, agent
Broker.
commission. Is it like that up there?
I don't see that often. There are definitely brokerage shops that try to sell everything in-house, and they don't really list it like we do in residential. My policy is always to list our properties and have a co-op, because my goal is to try to get the client the best deal. And I think that the best way to do that is take it to market. I don't know of many cases where I could argue against that idea. And so we really try to convince our clients that in their best interest is to list to the market, which means we might need to split the fee. So we might have it structured so our fee is less if we represent both sides, but if we have a co-op, it's a little higher. And I've done that in residential too. I think it's interesting. I was just talking to someone about all these new rules, and I kind of feel like residential is going to look a lot like commercial, where there's no advertised fee. You have to confirm the fee on every single deal. And in a lot of cases, the buyers do pay their brokers. And, that all gets factored into the deal at the end of the day. So I personally think that what's happened is going to make things less transparent. But in Oregon, we've had buyer broker agreements my whole career. So the idea of sitting down with a buyer and explaining your value and talking about commission, that's something I've been doing for almost 20 years. So I think in other markets where that isn't the case, this is going to be a more of a big deal. But it's interesting to me. I think it's going to end up acting a lot more like commercial real estate, which is, in my experience, less transparent than residential.
It's really interesting. I also believe it's going to be a lot like commercial. That's kind of where I was going with some of those questions, is trying to see, what it's like compared to what's going on and what's getting proposed. But what I haven't heard was somebody saying it'll end up being less transparent. You are right that no matter what, it just comes into the deal. I remember as a seller sometimes getting, offers written to me where the buyer's agent would put in the offer 4% buyer agent commission, right? Or they would call us and tell us, hey, we're only going to submit if you pay 3% instead of 2.5%. And I was always really curious about, like, are you telling your buyer that? Like, are you telling your buyer that by asking for an extra 1 or 2% commission, that now they can no longer get the price, or that's why I'm countering $5,000 higher, right? Because they'd say, like, because for us selling residential as investment properties, it was also not an emotional experience. It was a widget and there was a dollar amount. So they'd be like, hey, we want to buy the house for $300,000, but we want you to pay a 4% commission. And we'd be like, well, if it's going to be a 4% commission, we're going to sell it to you for 308. Right. And it always ticked me off when those conversations would be happening. And I wondered if the agent was being truthful with their buyer or not. Like understanding to their buyer, like, the reason we did not accept the offer was because of the extra commission, or does the buyer know that if they would have got the extra 1% in concessions, they could have paid less on their thing every month. And it seemed like even when it was in there, it wasn't transparent enough, because you never really knew what was getting communicated back. Like, well, Mr. Agent legally should, but does Mr. Agent actually tell the buyer, hey, they didn't accept the offer because I told them that I wasn't going to take less than 4% commission? Yeah,
and I think that's terrible. I mean, I think, again, if you sit down with a buyer and we've had it happen where we have a buyer broker agreement that has a higher fee because we're looking for something more complicated, or we know it's going to take longer, or they only want to look at off market, which means we need to call people directly and try to find kind of the needle in the haystack. But that was up front, right? That was something that we agreed to as part of working together. I agree that, sure, I bet that happens a lot. And I again, to the detriment of the client, which that at the end of the day, that's really not a positive way to run a business, because, I believe working by referrals is the best way to work. And you do that by taking care of people and making sure they have a good experience so that they want to work with you again. And they tell their friends and neighbors and people in their world about you and help you connect with more clients. I think that having that long-term view is more ethical and more profitable in the long run anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. The life is around, we're around for a long time. The real estate game is a really long game. And if you make the wrong agent mad, the wrong listing agent mad, the wrong buyer, you make the wrong enemy right now, it's going to affect your clients later. Like sometimes in transactions, people can, agents on either side. I've seen just some really nasty agents out there. And I always just wonder, like, so do you think we're never going to do a deal again ever? Or do you think that's not going to affect your buyer again ever? Like you having this personality now is going to, like, next time I'm not going to accept your buyer's offer because I don't want to have to work with you as an agent. And it's really, it's a funny experience. So you've been in real estate a long time. What's something that you wish you would have known when you first got started that now you do about real estate in general?
Oh, I mean, going back on it, I wish that I spent so much time meeting people. And that's kind of my story. I was working 14 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week. I was doing 4 open houses a weekend to go from 0 clients to my first couple hundred clients over the course of about 4 years. I wish I had just slowed down a little bit to make sure that I put all the people I met in a database and stayed in touch with them better. I would try to prioritize who I felt really needed my help, and I would focus on those people. But I wish someone had told me 1 out of 10 people you talk to is going to do something this year and 9 out of 10 aren't. It's very easy to manage your life if you're focused on the 1 out of 10 people that need you to just do your job as a realtor this year. But managing those relationships and staying in touch and providing value to the 9 out of 10 people that are going to be a client at some point in the next 10 years, but maybe not this year or next year, I think that's a huge key to long-term success. And so I wish I had been better about putting the 9 out of 10 people in the database too, and making sure that I was staying in touch with them at a higher level. And I feel like I did a pretty good job, but I still feel like I spent all this time and energy to meet these people, and I didn't take, I wasn't as diligent as I could have been. And I think that's important. And you got to kind of slow down a little bit to do that. You have to kind of do some data entry and make sure your newsletter goes out on time, and make sure you call and check in with those folks who aren't as responsive. And that's not easy to do, especially once you get busy. But long term, there's a lot of gold in that.
Yeah, that's really good advice. It's really, really good advice. And I like the breaking it down to, and it's not easy, right? It's not easy to say, here's who I'm going to focus on today for my best ROI. Cause that's how we survive in business no matter what. It's like the book, The One Thing, it's all sorts of stuff. It's like, what's going to make me the most money today? So I'm going to focus on that. But if you only focus on that and you don't do these other long-term things, then eventually it dries out, or there's less opportunity, or there's less people to focus on. But I like that. So of the 10 prospects you meet, 1 out of 10 is going to buy a house this year. 1 out of 10 will never buy a house. But 8 out of 10 will buy a house eventually. Right. So it's this funny thing of going, you're right. Every single person you meet eventually is going to buy a house. And if you do your job right, you've got a good chance at it being you. But if somebody isn't qualified today, I remember when times were really busy too, someone would qualify to get a loan to buy a house. They couldn't qualify because they didn't have the right income levels. And a lot of times they would just get kind of written off. It's like, oh, they're not qualified. They're not going to be able to buy a house. That doesn't mean that they aren't going to be qualified in a year or two or whenever. They obviously wanted to buy a house. It was very disappointing for them when they found out they didn't qualify. If you treat that relationship right, eventually you'll be their agent. Yeah. But 1 out of 10 this year, 8 out of 10 eventually, as long as you play your cards right.
Just remember that.
Yeah. So tell me about your book. What made you want to write a book?
So like I said, I spent 4 years beating my head against a wall, working really long hours trying to get ahead in real estate and build my business. And 4 years in, 2010, some of the agents in my office started getting out of the business. So changing careers, retiring, moving on. And I started buying up their books of business. So I would do what I call it. I would adopt their clients. So these are not leads. These are real clients that are being referred to me. And I woke up one morning. So I had 200 clients that I'd worked with on my own over 4 years, working incredibly hard to go from 0 to 200 clients. After I bought my first book of business, I woke up the next day with 500 clients. So I went from 4 years to get to 200. And then, the next day I wake up and I've got 500 clients. And then I started buying other businesses. And so we went from 200 to 2,000 clients over the next couple years. My team went from 2.5 people to 12. I stopped buying businesses because we didn't have enough agents to take care of it, because even with 12 people, we were scrambling to keep up. We would have, 36 escrows 1 month. We didn't have enough staff to do more than that. We were at our capacity. And the reason I wrote the Golden Handoff is because I was looking for a book to read and a model to follow in how to work with agents who were getting out of the business and help their clients and grow my business. And we reached out to all over the country to 800 offices, and basically the feedback was there isn't a book that talks about that. There's no process that's really well known. And so I ended up writing that book because I was encouraged, like, hey, if you're doing this and you've done it multiple times and you've documented it and it works, which it was working great. I mean, we were clearly making, doubling, tripling our revenue by doing this. And it was all by referral. And that was the thing that was crazy, is we weren't buying leads. We weren't really even competing for business. It was just take care of these people, just like you take care of your own clients, stay in touch, send out your newsletter, host some parties, host some classes, call them once or twice a year to check in, ask if they need anything, ask for referrals. And we grew exponentially. And so I went from being new to Portland to being one of the top agents. And the book took a couple years to write. It came out in 2015. I started buying businesses in 2010. And the new edition, which is why I'm here today, the big difference is that we're talking about what I call partial handoffs. And partial handoffs are not waiting until someone's ready to completely retire and working with those now. I mean, how many people, Aaron, do we know that are burned out and that don't want to deal with these changes?
Yeah.
And they've got great client relationships. They've got great clients. Those relationships are worth a fortune. But most agents just walk away, right? We don't have retirement parties for real estate agents. They just fade away.
They just stop. Yeah.
And guess what? Their clients all find other agents, but if you're not intentional about it, you have nothing to do with it. You might get a couple referrals, but if you find a good adopting agent and you're intentional about it, and you say, you know what, I don't want to work 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, which, by the way, is okay. You don't need to do that forever. You can partner with a good adopting agent or a team. And in the book, I talk about a lot of new ways to do that. Because a lot of people, they're burned out, but they don't want to quit completely. They just don't want to keep growing a business, and they don't want to keep hiring and training and building a team and doing all the stuff that's really difficult and comes with a lot of risk. And so if you can work on the clients you want to, when you want to, and let the adopting side of the team or your partnership handle everything else, you can get referral income from all of those other clients that you're going to ignore anyway, or that you don't have the time to stay in touch with, or you're just too burned out to do it. And you can focus on working with the core people you want to on the types of deals you want, but not lose out on everything else. And that's what I'm so excited about, because the biggest objection I got when I was talking to agents about buying their businesses and taking over was that they didn't want to completely retire. And all I would do is I would just go, okay, I'll call you in 6 months, or I'll call you in a year, and we'll check in again, which that made sense at the time. But the answer is not to wait until they're ready to retire. The answer is to start working together now before they completely lose touch with all these people. Because by the time someone like that really retires, they're so burned out that they're only doing a couple deals a year. They're not marketing, they're not advertising, they're not calling people back, and their business value is tanked, because they've lost touch with their clients. And the reason this works is that when clients know and trust their agent, and then that agent endorses an adopting agent, that endorsement means a lot. Because, if you've got a good CPA or attorney or doctor or dentist, you don't want to go find a new one, right? You want to just keep going to the same person. And if they retire or leave, you want them to say, hey, I'm moving to Texas, but here's your new dentist. They're great. They're taking over the practice. You're in good hands. And that hasn't been the case in real estate. And the Golden Handoff is the model of how to do that.
And that makes a lot of sense because so like a newer agent right now that is excited about real estate, that's excited about following up, that essentially doesn't mind having a list of 100 people that says like, hey, you bought a house last year, want to check and see how everything's going, right? Like just anything like that. So it could be a newer agent that is excited or likes setting up the systems or likes setting up the newsletters, but just doesn't have that big of a list yet. And then going to someone that has been an agent for a while. And I guess it's like reaching out and there's some sort of a conversation about like, hey, I'm new, I'm trying to grow my business. I was wondering if you had any intentions of maybe selling your business someday. And maybe you'll tell me about what that conversation's like. And then someone says, no, I'm still happy doing this. I'm not doing as much as I used to. And maybe there's some questions like, okay, but for all those clients you've had over the last 10 years, are you sending a newsletter? Are you reaching out to them right now? Like, are you actively trying to work with them? Like maybe there's something we can work together where I can start, kind of reworking your old clients while you just focus on the ones that you're dealing with. But how does the first, and I can see that being a big opportunity right now. Somebody going like, no, I want to keep my business going. You're like, that's totally okay. But can I start working your existing database and make sure that they remember you still do real estate? I'm going to help you, because that happens too. People list a house and you're like, wait, I helped you buy I helped you buy that house 3 years ago. And they go, well, I didn't realize you did listings or we're still here.
Totally. Yeah. Our clients don't know what we do. So, I mean, you got to be really clear about it and stay in touch. So let's just jump right into the scripting and the dialogues and how you say this. So Aaron, you're the retiring agent. I'm an adopting agent. Hey, Aaron, this is Nick. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Awesome. You've been in the business a really long time and I really admire your business and how you do things. And I've learned a lot from you. And, I was just listening to this podcast today. I learned about this thing called the Golden Handoff, and I'm curious. What are your plans with your business when you're done selling?
Well, what do you mean done selling?
Well, I mean, imagine one day you worked really hard. You probably want to retire one day, maybe take a break.
I haven't really thought about it. I'm not as busy right now as I used to be, but I'm still doing some deals. I still want to have my license just in case, I can help a friend now and then. Like I'm not ready to give my license up yet, but I'm not as busy as I used to be.
Okay. Well, I think for all the work and energy you've put in your business, you deserve the right to work with the people you love on the projects you love. But I'm curious, what do you think's happening with all the other clients and all the people you worked with in the past that maybe don't fit that box and aren't your, A+ people and your A+ locations? Are you still reaching out to them in marketing and staying and calling them twice a year? Or do you think maybe there'd be an opportunity to partner up and I could help all the folks maybe you're not staying in touch with and you could just focus on the stuff you love? Would that be interesting for you?
I hadn't thought about that. I like it, Nick. So I like that as a script. I think that is how I would picture that conversation going. I think there probably is, even during the role play, I'm realizing a lot of agents they probably have this thing hit them of like, I never even thought about that. And when you're like, hey, do you have any plans after you stop selling?
Right.
I think a lot of agents are like, wait, I never had a plan for that.
Yeah.
And then I also think, yes, a lot of them have a belief that they're never going to stop selling, that they can like sell a house twice a year in retirement. And so they just let their business fizzle out. And then that idea of like, well, why are you letting it fizzle out? Maybe I could still help. Like, I think a lot of those things that for when you find the right agent that's slowing down, that's tired of the stuff, that doesn't want to learn the new commission stuff or the new whatever.
Yeah.
I could really seeing that pitch work. So is that something in your book that you go into a lot of scripts on? And have you done this in the real world lately? Have you helped anyone recently go buy someone's book by partially taking over?
So personally, I haven't been focused on growing. Our database now has 22,000 people in it. So it's really about teaching my agents kind of how to do the staying in touch and finding the opportunity to help those people. But absolutely, I work with agents and teach these scripts and help them with this. And that's going to be kind of the next part of the journey for me with Golden Handoff, is doing consulting and training and coaching on how to implement this. I think we're at this really incredible point in history with real estate where you have kind of an economic shift happening with an industry shift. And we saw it during COVID too, where a lot of stuff went remote and a lot of agents really didn't like how working, they didn't want to work from home and on Zoom calls and sell houses to people they never met. And, we adapted fine for that. It was, you have to kind of figure out the new rules of how to operate. And again, right now, there's some new changes, and we can certainly learn how to operate in that and still be successful. But for a lot of agents, I think honestly, there were a lot of agents that wanted to retire during COVID, but because interest rates dropped and the buying spree just went through the roof, the market was just so strong. I talked to a lot of agents who were burned out that kind of were like, well, I was going to retire, but this is so easy and things are so good, I'm going to just keep going. And I think we're finally at that point now where the fun part of the cycle is coming to a close, or has been cycling down for about a year. And so there's this amazing opportunity to help agents who don't want to keep growing a business and don't want to keep iterating through this. And for all those agents who are trying to grow a business, I mean, the best way to bulletproof your business is just have more clients. And there's nothing you can do to grow as fast by referral as by buying businesses with a golden handoff. And so you will find anyone who makes these calls today. I would encourage everyone to write down the names of a couple agents whose businesses you admire and reach out to them and just to ask them exactly what I said. I was listening to this great pod today and learned about the golden handoff, and what are your plans when you're done selling? And 9 out of 10 people are going to say, I don't have a plan. I don't know. And if you're not growing, you're phasing out. And when you start phasing out, you start losing clients.
It's really interesting. Something I just thought of. So I did a quick search. It's like 40 or 50,000 agents retire every year, and that's a pretty good sized number. And, but I've met a lot of people lately so at first I'm thinking, I was going to ask like, Nick, how do you find people to target? And so that was kind of like question one. And then my first impression is going to be older people that have been around for a long time. But I also think there's probably an opportunity with this. I had a younger gal, recently tell me, so she's in her, late 20s. She's been an agent for 4 years, but it's really slowed down. And so she's going to go get a different job now. She's deciding that she doesn't want to be an agent anymore. Now, she might not have hundreds of past clients, but she probably has hundreds of past leads and 15 or 20 past clients. So really anyone that is deciding they don't want to sell anymore is a prospect for this. I think. I mean, ideally, if someone has 1,000, it's even better, but really it's even easier to get one from somebody that's like been in real estate for 2 or 3 years. They decide they don't want to do it anymore. How can they hand off, those leads because they can't work it anymore? I could see maybe doing some searches through MLS for agents that have, haven't done a deal in the last few months, but used to. Like there's probably somebody that did 20 deals last year, but has only done 2 or 3 this year. Like maybe there's a chance to reach out to them. Have you thought about that? Is that another strategy in your book? Do you think it applies the same?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's a whole chapter on finding retiring agents. And so I would say start with your brokerage. So wherever you keep your license, go to your managing broker or team leader and let them know you're interested in doing this, and ask, who do they know that's going to be moving to a different market, changing back to a more like a corporate career with a salary and a pension and benefits, who's actually retiring, who maybe ran a big team and had been a top producer it's now doing the couple deals a year. There's a lot of different ways. So the number one is the people you know already. So the brokers in your office and people you co-op deals with, have that conversation about what their plan is and let your broker know. And then look at who has production that's dropping, because that's a sign that someone's phasing out, either intentionally or not intentionally. And there's probably an opportunity to work together and to reinvigorate that client list and to reconnect with people. Because we all know that, like, when you start kind of slowing down and phasing out, the first thing that goes is you don't really stay consistent with your marketing plan, right? You stop investing in things and you kind of just work with what comes to you. And that's not a real business strategy. You have to stay engaged with people. You have to be proactive. And that's why the golden handoff works, right? Versus just, I'll just wait for people to call me and refer them out. That doesn't work because everyone already has 5 other agents they know. You have to have someone that's being proactive and providing value and saying, hey, you bought a house 5 years ago, but we also do listings. If you're thinking of moving, let us do a valuation. Those types of conversations take time and energy, and being proactive. So the book is called The Golden Handoff. And the second edition just came out. It's the one on the blue and white cover. If you see, there's the old one with the black cover. Has all the same information from the first, plus an entire new section of interviews and information about partial handoffs, which is where you work with someone that is, like you said, not ready to give up their license. They still want to do some deals. They still want to be in the game, but they're not growing the business anymore. And I think that is the biggest opportunity right now, is for agents to find those connections and help those agents.
Yeah. I think it is a really big opportunity right now. So if people go check out your book, they're going to learn about how to approach people, how to find people that might be interested in retiring and selling their business or handing off their business or giving away their leads. And I could also see it leading to a whole bunch of other conversations of, well, I have this database and I've never worked it. Well, can I work your database for you? There's lots of agents that have done some stuff right and they like doing what they're doing, and they don't like doing the rest of it. So just by having some of those conversations, I bet it can create a lot of good, fun partnerships. So any big, as you finish up, just like last couple of questions, any big predictions for the year in real estate or the next couple of years in real estate, of what you think it's going to take for different agents to survive, or what we're going to see in the market? Like any advice you'd give about what you think's happening next?
Yeah, I think I've been through some pretty brutal market cycles in 20 years. And so if you stay in touch and help people, I would say this, mindset wise, realtors don't control whether the market is going up or down or interest rates are going up or down. Our job is to help our clients win in the market that we're in. So whether the market is appreciating, depreciating, if rates are going up or down, if there's a lot of inventory or very little inventory, your job as an agent is not to be responsible for the market, but to help your clients win in that market, whether they're buying or selling. I think that's really important as a mindset thing. I do think that when interest rates go down, I think we might see pricing come down, because I think that it's interesting that nationally prices are still up a little bit, but it's because we have this incredibly low inventory. And so I wonder what happens when that inventory goes up. And I think that inventory goes up when rates tick down a little bit and people are able to sell their house with a 3% mortgage and buy one with a 5%, versus selling the 3% and buying a 6.5%, because that's a big difference in the cost of borrowing. And I think we might be kind of running out of buyer energy, even with rates coming down. So I think a lot of people think that the market's going to go gangbusters when rates go down. I also just don't think rates are going to come down as fast as people think.
Yeah. I don't think rates are going to be coming down very fast either. I think it's such a double-edged sword. If rates go way down, then one thing happens, but it creates pressure and complications in other part of the industry. There's plenty of years where rates were high like this and it just stayed like this, and it took people, a couple years to adjust, and then people adjust. It's the new normal, and this is what prices just are. But overall, what I do know is people will still be buying and selling houses next month and next year. Regardless of what rates are doing, transactions will happen. People will still be buying and selling commercial real estate, regardless of what happens. And new agents will be coming and other agents will be retiring. So Nick, so people can go check out your book, The Golden Handoff. How else can they get a hold of you? Any other way, if they reach out, if they've got questions, they want to learn more about like your coaching or any other advice that you come up with?
Yep. Just go to goldenhandoff.com. So there's links to a calculator to value your business. There's, if you sign up, you'll get access to all the scripts, dialogues, marketing pieces, everything I use in the process that's in the book. You'll get editable copies of that. And that's how you can get me too, is all my contact information's there. And I update that as we offer new things for people. And thanks so much for having me on today, man. It's great talking to you. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah. Pat was one of my early mentors. I met Pat in Africa as part of a mastermind we're a part of. We travel once a year. We go travel around the world together. And so I get to see Pat a couple times a year. Usually it's in really, really cool places. And so when you said that he got to interview you years ago and was a fan, that makes it extra special. I always love texting him after I got to interview somebody he already interviewed so long ago. So Nick, thanks for coming on, offering advice. Again, I think the skills and advice you had today are good. I think when we talked about, 1 out of 10 people are the one to focus on, but 8 out of 10 will eventually buy a house. So don't forget about them. And then also the opportunity for people that not everybody is sad about changes in the industry or changes in the market. And other people that are, and they're ready to move on. There's a big opportunity there that I think not enough people go after. The biggest highlight is, real estate agents do not have retirement parties. Usually they just kind of sneak away and say, I'm not transacting anymore. So Nick, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Awesome, man. Thank you.
And Real Estate Rockstars, this is Aaron Amuchastegui. Thanks as always for listening.